Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Luke Tannen. I'm Executive Director of Chicago Innovation, and I'm glad to welcome you all to today's virtual event, When the Going Gets Tough, Leading Through Adversity, presented by longtime sponsor SMS Assist. Now, in times of uncertainty, we look to leaders, and that is why today's topic is particularly timely. And we're very lucky to be joined this afternoon by some of the city's most innovative leaders and role models who will be on today's panel. Now, I want to let everyone know that if you have a question for the panel, please send your questions via the Zoom Q&A. We also received questions from many of you when you registered for the event, and we'll have those on hand as well. And we'll plan to spend about the last 15 to 20 minutes on audience Q&A. Now, before we get started, I want to thank and recognize all of our fantastic, wonderful Chicago Innovation sponsors who support us throughout the year, starting with our founding diamond sponsor, Theron Technology Solutions, as well as sponsors SMS Assist, Accenture, and Wintrust. Our gold sponsors, Comcast Business and Exelon. Silver sponsor, Vetter Price. Bronze sponsors, Thomson Coburn, Energy BBDO, Crown Castle, and Granger. And our media sponsors, WBBM News Radio, Crane Chicago Business, NBC, Clear Channel, and Intersection. Now I'm going to hand it off to our co-founder of Chicago Innovation and the president of Kuzmarski Innovation, Tom Kuzmarski.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I miss you all, but I know we'll get together again in person soon. Well, maybe not that soon, but pretty soon. Hey, today's topic is a fascinating one for me. My wife, Susan, and I have been talking about leadership for many, many years. In fact, we've even coined the term peopleship instead of leadership. Peopleship meaning a focus on empathizing and strengthening and developing employees within an organization, having a shared values mindset. And I think today more than ever before, leaders really need to be driven by strong values. Another trait that great leaders have is that they're always learning. And thanks for all of you for listening in today to hear from some of these great leaders that we've lined up for you. In fact, all four of our speakers today were among the leaders that we interviewed for our most recent book, Rising Together, The Story of Chicago's Innovation Ecosystem. So if you're looking for more great leadership examples as a follow-up to today's event, I'd encourage you to check it out. Now I have the great pleasure of introducing our moderator, Maria Wynne. Maria is the CEO of Leadership Greater Chicago, the region's premier civic leadership development organization. She previously held leadership roles at Microsoft and Xerox and was the CEO for the Girl Scouts of Greater Chicago and Northwest Indiana. Maria is also a Chicago Innovation Board member and a longtime friend. Please welcome Maria Wynne.
Good afternoon, Tom. Thank you so much for inviting me, and Luke. It's always wonderful to see you guys, and we are in for a great discussion this afternoon. I am pleased to have on the panel today Sam Yagan, who is the CEO of ShopRunner, prolific internet entrepreneur named to Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world, and also co-founder of OkCupid and previously the CEO of Match Group. Andrea Zopp, who I will call Andy, is the president and CEO of World Business Chicago, leading its mission of inclusive economic growth and promoting Chicago as a leading global city. Andy formerly served as deputy mayor, chief neighborhood development officer for Chicago, and president and CEO of the Chicago Urban League. Marc Shiffman is the CEO of SMS Assist, one of Chicago's prized unicorn companies, overseeing its finance, operations, and rapid growth over a 10-year span, which includes scaling to over 1,000 employees. Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome. There is no doubt that the current pandemic is shining the light on leadership across the globe, across our nation, across sectors and communities. We are observing leadership from those who are in power or have titles, and we are seeing leadership stem from unexpected places. We are seeing the best of people under tough circumstances, and sadly, also not the best. I think many of us are dipping into our leadership toolkits for tools we might not have used in some time, or modulating some of them. So I want to start with Sam And then I would love you all to answer this first question, which is, what has past experience with adversity taught you, and how has this prepared you to lead in this moment?
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I, like many leaders here, have been, through a lot of different macro adversities, whether it's whether the dot bomb collapse in 2000, whether it's 9/11, whether it's the financial crisis, and even through my own business challenges, companies facing financial challenges, legal challenges, what have you. I have personally found that there's really very little to draw on from those previous experiences. And as I've reflected on why that is, I think humans struggle with ambiguity and uncertainty. And it's actually, I think, one of the biggest drivers between people who are drawn to entrepreneurship and those who aren't, is the ability to deal with that. But what we have now is we have ambiguity really on all sides of one's life. You can't just segment, okay, well, here's what's going on at work. I'm going to go home and everything is, where I feel I have quote unquote control. People are working from home, but then also looking around, and there's health concerns, there's macroeconomic concerns, there's political concerns, there's health concerns. And then you go to work and there's just more uncertainty and ambiguity. So that to me has been the biggest overall challenge in facing this particular pandemic, is how to try to provide some level of how to help reduce ambiguity for people so they can look to have something steady in their life, to try to provide some amount of certainty, too strong of a word, but some amount of stability in an otherwise unstable world.
Great. Andy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Sam and the idea that this is unprecedented. To draw on prior experiences, they were like kind of mildly tough. This is wholly disruptive, and a tremendous sense of loss on a wide variety of sectors. And so I think he's absolutely right that you can't just look at what came before and learn from it. But I do think there are some leadership traits that we're seeing that I think are really, really important in a time of uncertainty and ambiguity. I think empathy. I think the leaders that you see that are doing well are those that have empathy and a recognition of how challenging this is for a wide variety of people, not just those for whom it is obviously challenging, but for everything. I think as much transparency as possible, again, being able to share what data you can, what you can, and being clear and showing strength. I think leaders that can and are showing that they are strong in face of this adversity give comfort to those who are facing ambiguity. And then I also think that leaders who are making decisions, but are making reasoned decisions. So it goes back to transparency. So those leaders who are stepping up and making tough calls, saying, I am making this tough call, but here's why I'm making it. Here's where I'm trying to go. I think those things help give comfort and are really the strong, really important strengths. And those are the leaders who are doing that are the ones that you are seeing who are compelling, that you want to hear from. And we've seen that on a wide variety of levels.
Thank you, Marc.
All CEOs and leaders of organizations pull on different skill sets. Obviously, we're on unprecedented times here, so it's hard to reach down and pull for anything that you could specifically relate to this scenario. Fortunate enough for me, I spent a decade of my career working on turnaround work and crisis management. So the hard skills of business are very comfortable to me. And one of the things I've learned is you must believe in yourself and your intuition as a leader. You have to go with your gut. Things are happening very quickly. And as things change in a very rapid pace, you want to make sure that your belief in yourself and your confidence, and it's not arrogance, it's confidence, comes across to those that you are speaking with and leading. And I feel if you over communicate in these situations, both on a professional level and a personal level, people truly feel better about the circumstances they find themselves in, and allow them to relate to you and allow them to help and follow you on your journey as you're transforming your organization to meet the current economic crisis as it unfolds. So as an example, it's okay if you have kids at home and they're running through your Zoom calls, or you have pets that are hopping up on the counter. That's a very human side. I often share stories about my kids. I have one son in middle school and one son in high school, and the struggles of both parents and kids in e-learning. I've made myself relatable, not because I'm intentionally trying to do that, because I too am a human being. And I think if they see you struggling as employees and they see you as a leader who has the same issues and problems, when you then have to talk to them about your business dilemmas and the actions that you've taken, it's far easier to get them to get on board and believe in you and your strategies.
I couldn't agree more. And you're all kind of coming around some of the same thoughts around being human, being authentic, and showing who you are. And I have loved the occasional cameo appearances that I've seen on Zoom calls, which do let us to have an insight into other people's lives. And it's some of them are quite amusing and charming. As you've watched this pandemic unfolding, what is an example or some examples of great leadership that stand out for you in recent weeks? Andy, do you want to start with us?
Well, I mean, look, let's face it, we're in Chicago. I think we have, our mayor has been an obvious, at least for me, standout when it comes to leadership in very tough situations. And so I think we are fortunate, but I think you've also seen, other examples of on a smaller level of young people who are coming home from school and creating programs to go shop for other people in their neighborhoods and creating activities for others in their, not only support the people in their community, but creating things, for a focus point for their other students who are coming home. I think, someone, when we started this conversation, talking about the idea that leadership comes both at the high level, but really at the local level when we're talking about when people are stepping up in a wide variety of ways.
Marc?
Look, I think we've seen tremendous examples in the public sector, the private sector. But for me, it's really about attributes. Those people who have to take a very public stage have a true broad responsibility that weighs heavily on them and on their constituencies. And I think what's most important during this time is when you talk about leaders, you need to instill confidence in anyone you are speaking to. You need to be clear and you need to be articulate. And you also, if possible, need to be analytical and support your findings with data. And I think we've seen leadership really step up and behave properly under these circumstances and truly show that they want to do what's best for most, which is keep everyone safe and ultimately healthy.
Sam?
I would just add to what Andy and Marc said. I agree with both. I think the leaders that have drawn on, have led with values, have drawn on and exposed their humanity, and have, made the tough decisions for the right reasons. And by right reasons, I don't just mean the bottom line in your company. It's, I had a moment when we decided to cut, not that I'm an example of great leadership, but just an example of, simply changing from what is the right, should we close the office or not? What's best for ShopRunner to what's best for the city of Chicago and for the first responders and the people who have to be out. Just changing your lens from, is my primary obligation to myself and my company, or is it to my community? The people who have really been able to say, this is a moment for all of us to lead beyond just the company. I think that's where we've seen some great leaders step up.
So as we're leading through this environment that is posing so many opportunities on a daily basis. How are you maintaining the culture of your organization through this disruption, or are you having to rethink some of your culture? Marc, what do you think?
So we've definitely had to rethink it. I'm one of those leaders who loves to walk throughout the halls of my organization, talk to people, some high fives, some hugs, some fist bumping. And how do you maintain that touch in far fewer dimensions, pretty much over Zoom? So what we did immediately was we implemented a virtual culture page where every Friday we run contests, and it's really around engagement. It's Photo Friday. So we did a post your childhood photo, of course, for Mother's Day. We celebrated all the great moms out there and the mom role models. I used to do a monthly Where in the World is Marc, and I would post up about all my travels to meet all my customers and any trade shows or any speaking engagements. And I was unable to do it because obviously I'm at home like everyone else. So we morphed that in Where in the World would you like to be? And everyone posted up their vacation photos and showed us pictures of places that they want to be at. We had Crazy Quarantine Cap Day. We have close to 1,000 people at SMS. Getting that engagement was really tremendous. And the amount of people, hundreds and hundreds of people participate every week. We've also done virtual panels about working from home, virtual book clubs. We did some tips on gardening, some baking. It's all about SMSers really feeling connected and engaging. And in the month of May, it's the Healthy Month of May, the at-home challenge. So every day we do some kind of program. They had Plank Day the other day. It's amazing what you could do with all these people on Zoom. We've also partnered with another great Chicago company called Chill Chicago, which offers live meditation classes. And I know people have really, really responded well to those. And for me, it's really been about how through this camera do I get people to feel healthy, happy, and connected to one another? Because that's truly what I put first, the health and well-being of the employees. And much credit to my HR team and my engagement team. They've done a wonderful job at connecting all the SMSers and making us feel like one big family, even though we're not together.
That's great. Sam, how about you?
I think the only reason we've been able to get through this is by relying on the culture. I have some friends who took CEO jobs the first week of March, and I just can't imagine showing up and this being, you don't have the trust, you don't have the relationships, you don't have the investment in the culture, you don't embody the values. I just can't even imagine how you would do that. Sure, the culture is going to evolve, and I think Marc just rattled off a whole list of what sounded like different manifestations of the culture, if I understood you right, Marc. Not so much a new culture, but more how can we take what was working before and adapt it to the new reality. And I, of course, believe in that. But I really think that if your values were the long-term, foundational values, they almost by definition should adapt. They should be the foundation from which you lead and from which you get through. I mean, what good are values and what good is the relationship you have, the equity you have as a leader, if not to get you through times like this?
Yeah.
I mean, what I told my leadership teams, I said, we've, for the last 4 years, invested in our values, our culture, our people, and not that we're drawing down necessarily, but we're going to lean on that investment now. So of course things have to evolve and change, and the way the culture and the values show up will be different, but I wouldn't want to be changing my culture now.
Andy, how about you?
I just, once again, I just totally agree with Sam. I think the important piece is you have the culture, you have the values, and how do you replicate it and show it in a virtual world? What do you need to do the things? Marc mentioned that he liked to walk around and give hugs, and I'm very similar. And so how do you do that? How do you do the virtual hugs? How do you make sure you're touching people in their lives? And you've heard some examples. Marc had some great examples of things that he's doing. We're doing a number of similar things. I think the most important thing is you got to stick with is really that combination of both what Marc and Sam said. You got to have the values. And then you've got to be intentional about activating those values, maybe even more so in the virtual world, because you don't see people every day. So you don't see them if you don't intentionally do something. But you should be making sure that you're creating those opportunities to activate your values in your virtual world, so that you can maintain them. But you're right, it would be very difficult to build them now. It's about really finding different ways to touch people. So, and you heard some great suggestions, and there's others out there, but the most important thing is to be thinking through what are our values and how do we make sure that we're touching our people on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And, you are such great examples for the people who are looking up to you, who want to be leaders and are thinking about leadership. And I look at this moment and I have to believe that tomorrow's leaders will be shaped in part by what is happening today, what they're seeing us do as leaders of organizations. But in your opinion, what will the leaders of tomorrow look like? How will they be different, or will they be? Andy, what do you think?
I don't think they'll be dramatically different. I think, we've talked a lot about some of the core things that I think make great leaders. I don't think those things will dramatically change. How they show them, how they live through them, I think, may be different. They may be more flexible with doing a lot of stuff on screen than I think certainly I was when this started. But I don't think they're going to be dramatically different. I think you're going to see some core strengths. You got to be resilient. You've got to be human. And nobody expects, I think sometimes, particularly this has been true for young people stepping into leadership forever. And you know this, Maria, because you run a leadership program. People think, when you get to leadership, you got to get it right all the time. You got to be perfect. You can't screw up. You can't show your weaknesses. And when it's exactly the opposite, you're not going to be perfect all the time. You have to have confidence. You have to be resolute, but you have to be human, and you have to, when you do make those mistakes, you have to be willing to say that. But that doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. And it's that living in your humanness, but also, I think Marc said, knowing, being comfortable with who you are as a leader is going to be very important. And I think those traits are going to be true. Perhaps one thing was that they'll be a little bit more comfortable with ambiguity than I think some leaders are, because we've had, you've had to be in this environment. You just don't have a choice, because the world is changing every day, and we don't know, where we sit today. We certainly didn't know we were going to be here in this way, in this space, at the beginning of March. And perhaps we should have, but I don't think most of us did. And where we're going to be at the end of the summer, I think we can have some ideas, but I don't think we really know that. And that's kind of incredible, right? When you're used to thinking in quarters, all of a sudden you're like, hey, at the end of this quarter, I'm not really sure where we're going to be in terms of environment. Are we going to be in our office? Are we going to be face to face? And that's, I think leaders coming up will be more comfortable with that environment than perhaps leaders who haven't led through this.
Sam or Marc, your thoughts?
I agree with Andy. I think what we see in leaders is what we want in leaders, but I think there's a shift in what they, quote, would accept from leaders. I think very often when a leader makes a mistake, it's troubling for an organization, but when you're in crisis and you're moving so fast, you're bound to make mistakes. I've encouraged our team, hey, before we get out on a live feed, just make sure everyone has their notes in front of them. Did you check the information twice? Did you practice if you had time to practice? It's okay if things don't go right in the Zoom presentation. We joke around. We have an executive producer who produces our show in our virtual world. But I think the future leaders of tomorrow will realize not only is it okay to make a mistake, but your board says it's okay to make a mistake. Okay, so your employees see it, your board see it, your customers know you're doing the best job possible, but under some pretty dire circumstances. So if you don't get it right 100%, that's okay. And I think what it does is it will drive the next generation of leaders to be more creative. You must succeed. You have no choice. You must go forward. We all want to bring our companies out on the other side and be winners. And we want to know that our companies will continue to thrive, and that we'll be able to hire more employees in Chicago and keep developing our business. So what it's really going to do is it's going to take the creative mindset and accelerate those type of individuals, the really think out of the box individuals, for coming up with some really unique strategies during this time. And those individuals will now get the spotlight shown on them, which may be something new in organizations.
Great.
I'll just add the word trust, I think, is going to become more important than ever. You know, with something this, you know, what you call it a black swan event or whatever you want to call it. But I think people realized people had a moment where, oh my gosh, so much of my career, my economic stability, all is in the hands of ultimately one person or a small group of people. Boy, I sure hope I trust them. And when you realize the decision of whether you lay people off or not and take salary cuts or not, or how lead transparently or not, the people you're kind of stuck in the boat that you got on, and you better hope you trust the captain to get you through it. And so I think trust will matter more than ever. And I think our leaders will hopefully focus their careers on future leaders on really building and earning that trust.
Thank you. Okay, so switching from the leader to how we look at future employees. What are you thinking, or what are you observing that is going to be important as you look at people that you might bring into your organization in the future? Does it change how you look at your employee, at the characteristics, or what you'd like to see as traits in new employees? Who wants to start?
I'll go. I mean, I think, you know, again, I think it's not so necessarily new, but it is, I think it maybe shifts the order of importance. I think, look, you gotta have, if you have employees that aren't flexible, that can't handle, you know, the change in a work environment or a work setting, or, you know, so we all have those employees who are like really very kind of straight and narrow and don't deal with a change in things very much. That's going to be challenging in going forward. So I think you want that. I think you want resilience. I think you want, you know, Marc touched on this, innovators, people, and you're also going to need people who are going to take initiative, because you're not necessarily, there's not going to necessarily be somebody standing there suggesting to them what to do. So I think those are all traits you want now, but perhaps they move up to the top, you know, higher on the list as you're looking for talking to people, but they're going to become increasingly important.
Yeah.
I agree with Andy. I think what makes a good employee today will be the same attributes or traits that make a good employee tomorrow. There's a reason why you choose certain employees that you know will be successful in your organization. And all of our organizations have core values. And at SMS, we talk about the innovative spirit. I think for us, it's even more apparent that I need that creative problem solver. I need people who can think harder, longer, broader, and help us come up with creative solutions on the very front lines, because the way we go about doing business today is certainly different than how we conducted our affairs pre-COVID. And I think that person who's enabled themselves to be flexible and open-minded, that person who thinks out of the box will have a far easier time being successful in our organization versus that rigid mindset individual. Going forward, that won't work for us any longer.
I don't think I have anything to add. I think they got it.
Okay, good. All right. So, Andy,
hey, Maria, the one thing I do want to just touch on is not just what the traits you need. I do think one thing we all have to be careful about, and you know, there's been some things written about this, is this in this virtual world, there is no, you know, there's no the same barriers that we have, like it's the end of the day, the work day, and so you go home. When you start at home and you end at home, those barriers get removed. And because we are a 24/7 world and we're global, you know, that tendency to not put limits in place for employees, particularly those who are engaged and super productive, is easy to overcome. It's easy to start making those demands. And so I do think it becomes really important on us as leaders to make sure that we encourage our employees to set those limits, and whether it is, you know, definitive stop time, or whether it is the ability to take time out of the day so you can explain math to your student who you're helping to teach, or having those flexibility. But it is making sure that we create virtual workspaces to the extent we're still working virtually for people that allow them to live their lives, because it becomes so much easier when you're working from home all the time to have your work life blend into your home life. And we all know how important that life outside of work is for strong, great employees and for great humans. And so I think it does become incumbent upon us to make that happen.
No, I agree. Thank you. And that's really important. I find myself reminding my team, you know, stop. Don't be emailing at XYZ time. Don't feel that you have to do this. So it's important. It really is important for us as leaders to not only remind our teams, but also to set the example for that. And Andy, I was going to ask you, you know, I know this is probably a relatively short period of time to begin to gather thoughts on this, but how do you think, you know, as a leader of World Business Chicago, how do you think this moment affects recruiting to cities? What does the future look like for the growth of cities?
You know, look, cities and urban centers were on a, you know, big, high trajectory. You know, young people wanted to be here, wanted to be engaged. I don't think that's going to dramatically change, you know, in the longer run. In the short run, I think people are absolutely rethinking, you know, being in crowded places and thinking that through. But I think we still have, you know, our core assets are our core assets. You know, we have great talent. We have lots of great things for people. We have incredible housing. And I think young people are still going to want that. But I definitely, you know, people are going to rethink, just like people are going to rethink in the short run, do I want to get on a bus or on a public transportation system? I think in the immediate short run, that's going to be challenging for people, but I think we'll work through that. And the things that were making us strong and that trending towards urban centers are not going to dramatically change. But, you know, it is, to your point, it is a little early to tell how the shock waves from this pandemic and this particular crisis, how far reaching they are.
What are your thoughts, to all of you, on what this does to the talent pool that you have access to? Does it change that for you?
I think I would say a little differently, which is I think everyone is going to have access to a broader talent pool. We see our top talent being recruited by companies that don't have any Chicago presence, because, you know what, they've committed to being fully remote or more accepting of remote. I think that's actually the bigger risk than, or maybe the bigger change, the way I look at hiring, than, sure, can I have more flexibility? Can I cast a wider net? Can I be more flexible to people in different geographies? You know, part of the reason I moved my company to Chicago was to take advantage of the labor market and to say, you know, I want to be here where there's this amazing talent. And, you know, if companies that are not in Chicago now have easier access into our amazing talent, I think that's a huge disadvantage for Chicago companies. Great win for Chicago talent, but I think a challenge for Chicago companies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Marc, Andy, any thoughts on that?
I agree with Sam. I think, you know, I have the contrarian view of this whole work from home. We are able to do it. I mean, there are 1,000 of us working from home. We've been successful in maintaining our business, keeping our customers happy. We have the infrastructure in place from an IT perspective to do it, and we are doing the most and best we can on the engagement. But the contrarian view to this is, what else would you possibly be doing? Now, I know we talked about work-life balance and helping out with the kids and spending some quality time, but if there are 24 hours in a day, you sleep 8 hours, you have 16 hours to do 8 hours worth of work for a frontline employee with no distractions, or if there are distractions, they're limited just in a few hours during the day with the kids. When the city, when the state, when the world starts opening up and you can go to bars and restaurants and you can meet your friends and you can become that full and complete human being, you won't necessarily have the same amount of time available to you that you would dedicate towards your work. And so I am very concerned with the productivity fall off, because there's a lot of pressure on me to allow people to continue working from home for a long time. There's also the camp that says, well, it should be a perk. The people who have been employed the longest are the people who produce the best scores, assuming you have KPIs and you can judge them. As a perk, they should be allowed to work from home. And my fear is if you're a new employee or you're a lower performing employee, you will not have the benefit from those tenured employers or those high functioning employees who can really bring you along on the journey and help you and help your company and help your culture. So I think we're going to all find ourselves in a bit of a Wild West scenario, feeling pressure from outside of Chicago. I think most of us are very neighborly in Chicago. We do have a limited labor market as compared to other cities, but there have always been enough people to help each and every one of us be successful. But added pressure from outside will be difficult, especially in the short term.
Yeah. So as we look forward to hopefully returning to work, how are you thinking about managing situations or managing the situation as a whole to make sure that people are not apprehensive or that they feel comfortable coming back to work? What are some of the things that you're already doing or are thinking of doing to help that situation?
Well, I can tell you there's not only just at WBC, but there are several sector-based working groups put together to try and work through, what does that look like? How do you keep people comfortable and safe and making sure that they feel safe? And there'll be a lot of things in play, different kinds of workstations. There's, I learned the other day that there's technology that where you have elevator buttons that self-sanitize. Who knew? But I do think you'll be saying, yeah, I know. Like,
no idea.
I wish we could have used those before this pandemic. So, but I think, every workspace is going to be different, but I think one of the things we saw even in the immediate aftermath of the shutdown, one of the things when I was talking to employers that I saw that I knew, but really came out was I had so many employers whose business had just been shut down. Small, local neighborhood businesses don't have a lot of resources. Their first and primary concern was, what are we going to do for my employees? I'm worried about my employees. Are they going to have access? And I think that is true for so many companies. And I know that sounds a little Pollyannish. People are like, oh, nobody cares about the workers. But that's just not been my experience, particularly in entrepreneurial companies. And so I think companies are going to step up to make sure that their work environments are safe and that their employees feel comfortable. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge because, of course, every employee is different. But I think you're going to see people being very creative and innovative. And I think you're going to start seeing technologies that are going to help support that.
Thank you for that view. And we're at a point where I can turn to the audience. And there's a question from the audience that I think dovetails nicely into this. And it's from Curtis Powell. He says, what fundamental changes in employee, customer, and other stakeholder behaviors do you think will persist for the long term after the immediate threat is over?
Well, I think, look, at least for the immediate future, you're still going to see social distancing when people are interacting. You're going to, hopefully, you're going to have to. I think people are going to be way more conscious about, personal hygiene and cleanliness in their workspaces. And I think you'll see that. And hopefully, what I'd like to see, and unfortunately we've seen a lot of it, but we've also seen a lot of the negative. You're going to people think a little bit more about community and sense of community, how what you do impacts others. We've seen a whole lot of that. We've also seen, some insensitivity to that. But I think that core idea that what you do can have a broader impact is going to stick with us for a while.
I've signed every email for the past couple of months, stay healthy, Marc. I end every email, stay healthy. And I've said on every occasion, my number one priority to each employee of SMS is you personally, stay healthy. If you are healthy, you can help keep your family healthy. If you and your family are healthy, you will keep SMS healthy. Because if you're not healthy, you won't do good to your family and you won't do good to your employer. And what concerns me the most, it's not about what's going to happen in our offices. Andy, Sam, myself, Maria, we all have different offices. But what happens when people leave their homes? They need to get to an office building. And then depending on the building, they have to make their way from the front door through a lobby, and then into the office, or through a lobby, into a series of elevator banks, and then into an office. So it's much more than just what the companies are going to do. This gets into the public, private, civic. This is something that we all have to work on. And I think people will be far more aware of health and well-being in the future than they ever have been in the past.
Another one from the audience says, this is from Sariq Khan. What are some examples of cringe-worthy instances of bad leadership or things not to do during this time that you have seen or heard about?
I'm not going down that path. I mean, look, I think we've all seen, every one of us has at least one of those stories, and I don't know that that's, productive or helpful. We know it when we see it. And then we've also seen countless other examples of people stepping up in remarkable ways. And so I think, we know which ones we want to model after, and we know which ones we shouldn't.
I think mine are just lessons or circumstances. So one, if you say you're going to do it, you better do it. At the end of the day, it's your integrity that counts. If you commit to something, you better follow through, and whether it's COVID or not, as a good leader, you should always keep your word. I had one funny one when we first started working from home remote. We were going on Zoom. I was on with one of my leaders, and I went to get a third individual on the Zoom call with us, and I hit the wrong button. And all of a sudden, this frontline employee pops up, and they're all excited. They saw me. I thought, God, this is a moment of reckoning. Either I can be like, well, I really didn't mean to call you. Or I said, you know what, I'm just going to embrace it. Hey, John, how are you? We were thinking about you. We were so worried about you. How have you been? How's your family? And since that day, I've reached out to 400 of my employees personally, Zoom bombing them because it was so effective with this person. So that's one example of a leadership that I turned around that could have been a disaster.
That's great. So from
I did hear a story from one of my kids about someone who was in the middle of right before a conference call, was Instagram and created an Instagram picture where she made herself a potato head, and then she couldn't, like a Mr. Potato Head face, but then she couldn't turn it off for the Zoom conference, and so then she had to do the whole Zoom conference as a Mr. Potato Head, which frankly I thought was kind of nice. But since I can't do either, I can't turn it on or off, it's not really a problem for me, but I thought it was great. I would love it if one of my employees would come to a conference call as Mr. Potato Head.
That's a great story. There's a question from Dr. Bill Truesdale that says, what advice do you have for small businesses to innovate and market during the COVID-19 challenge?
So for SMS, we provide facility services. COVID-related services were not part of the offering. So immediately we spun into, we can do a light clean, the Lysol and the rags, we can do a heavy clean, the bombing. And then we said, well, we can change touchless door fixtures, faucets, toilets for hand activated. We can change out different doorknobs so people don't have to touch them with automatic closures. And then we morphed our motto and we said, well, why are we just marketing this to our current customers? We said, this is an opportunity for anyone who needs these services. And so we blasted to about 20,000 different potential customers. And we've got tremendous feedback for them for those services. And then we've been able to morph and start selling some of our current services. So for me, it was really just, how can we be helpful? And then how can we spread the word about how we can be helpful? And hopefully it works. I mean, we said, we'll try, we'll see what happens.
Okay. There's a question that was sent in earlier that says, what percentage of a CEO's time should now be spent looking beyond the returning to work phase?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
What percentage of a CEO's time should now be spent looking beyond the return to work phase?
I think, all the CEOs, that I've talked to over the past couple of months, their first and foremost, I mean, obviously their first and foremost was dealing with the immediate crisis. How do you keep your employees safe? How do you get them from home? Who's staying? Who can work remotely? So I think there was an immediate, you got to respond to the crisis. For many of them, it was portions of their business completely shut down. But I think all of them, and I think both Sam and Marc can speak to this, were in their part of their brain thinking about, how am I going to run my business? Well, how am I going to run my business today? How am I going to run my business 6 months from now or 12 months? Because that's how they think. And so I don't know anyone who completely shut their brain down and said, other than for that immediate crisis, and said, I'm not worried about where my business is going to be in the future. And so I think that's a continual piece, but the two CEOs can weigh in as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think March was, I look at it sort of as the calendar's turned. March was very much a, react, crisis mode. Literally, I had an executive team meeting every day from March 11th through the end of the month. Like, we were meeting daily. And then, calendar turned to April, and we were like, okay, now it's more scenario planning. We don't really know what the future is, I think to Andy's point earlier, but let's start to sort of scenario plan, figure out what the futures might look like. And I think now in May, we are almost, of course, we're thinking about reopening and all those things. In fact, we have an office in Poland where we already reopened an office, and we've already started, we already got our first taste of how to have an office open in a post-COVID world, which has been an interesting learning. So I think now we've sort of incorporated COVID-related activities into our planning and how we think about, our business. I mean, this is now our business. It's no longer an asteroid that has hit us. It has now been engulfed and absorbed by the business. And so I don't see it as much as, am I thinking about COVID or not COVID today? I'm thinking about the business, and a big part of that business is COVID.
So another question that came in earlier says, what is one strategy, or what is a set of strategies that you would recommend job seekers implement during these difficult times? What should they be doing?
Well, I think if you're looking for work, I think you got to be doing a couple things. I mean, obviously waiting for there are places hiring. And so I think you got to be, doing the traditional things, but I also think it's networking. I also think there's going to be new jobs created. There's new jobs being created in the tech field. There's new jobs created in the health field. And so the question is, do you either have skill sets that fit those new roles, or are you willing to develop some new skill sets? So I think number one is thinking about who's hiring, but also two, thinking about what are your skill sets. This is an opportunity now for you to maybe morph into doing something completely different, because there are going to be new opportunities being created.
Yeah, and I think it's nuanced depending on what kind of job you have and are looking for in your skills. Are you a retail worker looking for a frontline job? Are you an executive looking for a job? I'll tell you, we have a hiring freeze right now. So if you are interested in working at ShopRunner, looking at our jobs page isn't going to get you very far. As we knock on wood, as we eventually thaw out of our hiring freeze, likely the first few things will be, hey, I know someone who can do this, or I met this person. And so being on our collective radar as someone interested in what we're doing is certainly a good thing. But I think maybe more than anything in these times of disruption, I think really being thoughtful about, you kind of get to bet with your time on a management team, an industry, and a company. And so again, is it a team I trust? Is it in an industry that I think will be benefited, that will emerge stronger post-COVID, and just being, really thoughtful about how you pick where you work.
So
It's a
today,
question- Oh, go ahead, Marc.
I was going to say today we may not be hiring. We're still willing to backfill for roles where, people are leaving jobs even during this crisis. There's always going to be change. And I think people should not be afraid to reach out to organizations, make a connection, make yourself known. If anything, maybe someone has more time to take a phone call, an informational phone call with you. And certainly, and this always is the same rule, use that network. Talk to as many people as you possibly can. Tell them what you're looking for and see if people can help you. And I think people will be very receptive and offer any kind of help or assistance they possibly can during these times. But everyone should remember, don't give up. You just got to keep pushing forward. There are opportunities out there and you'll find it.
There's a question that's come in from an anonymous attendee, which says, as a senior functional leader in my firm, I'm feeling distant from 2 or 3 levels down from me in my reporting structure. Is there a recommended way to remind those employees that I'm still here and care about their performance and about their well-being? What would you recommend?
I've been doing team lunches, virtual, of course, with my second level down teams. So a leader of a team that doesn't report directly to me is usually someone in my org that would have the right size org. And I basically just say, hey, let's just get together. We spend the first 20 minutes just being social. And then usually the last 30, 40 minutes are, more business questions that people have on their minds. I find it very hard to do these, town halls over Zoom. You have no idea if what you're saying is landing. You don't get the audible feedback because everyone's on mute. You can't watch all the faces to see if anybody's, laughing at your jokes. It's just so hard. So I've been trying once a week to, hey, this is my analytics team lunch. This is my sales team lunch. This is my operations team lunch. And that I found is nourishing for me because I live off that positive feedback and energy and human interaction, but B, reminds people that I still work here, which I know people may forget.
So I send out a daily newsletter every day. I've written to my team, all employees, every single day since the first day this started. And sometimes it's tough to find content, but I try to deliver some kind of message. And I try to relate to something that happened to me personally, something going on in the world, something they want to hear, sometimes business. And I encourage them, and it's amazing how many people write back to me. And then I start that dialogue going through email. Sometimes they text me on Zoom. Similar to Sam. So what I've asked my direct reports to do is their biggest meeting that they have of the week, where they're meeting with most of their frontline teams. So it could be, any place up to 50 people on a call for me, invite me. And I pop in. I try to get there at the beginning of the meeting just so I'm not disruptive. Sometimes, depending on my schedule, I'm not there till the middle or the end. And I say, ask me anything. And they have these crazy questions. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're good. And I show my human side and I laugh with them. And then of course I keep them too long and their bosses are mad at me because they're not going back to work. But it's that human connection. People forget as CEOs, as leaders, we're people too. This is a two-way street and we need a little help and we need a little support. And sure, we can prop each other up, but there's nothing better than knowing your workforce likes you, embraces you, likes what you're doing, loves the company, thinks, that you're really heading down a good path. And so for me, getting invited to all these meetings, when you pop in, and sometimes it's the element of surprise, it's gone a long way for me.
Great. Well, we're a few minutes from closing, and I thought I'd ask this other question that came in from the audience earlier, which says, when the going gets tough, where do the tough go to recharge their batteries? Andy, what do you do?
I work out. I go and I used to go to the gym. Now I go into my front room and I work out. I also go for walks. So I think Marc mentioned it, which is my form of meditation. But I think the key is a little bit of disconnecting from the immediate, whatever the issues are of the day. And so when I'm working out, I'm only thinking about not dropping the weight on my foot.
I conveniently started meditating earlier this year on January 1st. It was my New Year's resolution was to meditate every day. So it's very, very well timed.
Thank
So,
God.
no, it's very helpful.
Genius resolution.
I'd rather be lucky than good. I have an executive coach that has been more important to me than ever in the last couple months. So I think it's looking for help when you need it. It's finding time to again pull yourself out of the day to day or all the burdens, and then just not forgetting to have time with your family or your friends. Or I've been trying to reconnect with. I've been doing Zooms with friends I haven't talked to in years, just because I've been needing more ways to feel leadership can be lonely sometimes, and I have needed to feel less alone at times in the last couple months. And it's been good to just reconnect with different people in my life who feed me in different ways.
So for me, it's been both mental and physical as well. The best day was when the Peloton bike arrived in the middle of my living room now. And so I get on that bike for 1 hour, put those earbuds in and crank that music. And that is my time for myself, not for my employees, not for my family, just for me. And that's been really, really helpful. And I just sweat it out. And that's great. In terms of the connections, I too have been doing Zooms with friends, some I haven't spoken to in years, old friends, and it's great to reconnect. And that feels good. And also with my family, I've been spending time with them, and especially with my kids, and explaining to them, what this means for all of us as a family. We have to figure out now what the summer is going to look like. Is there going to be e-learning in the fall? And really just being thoughtful and having some great conversations has been really helpful. And then one of my investors has In Your Shoes. It's one of their CEO outreach groups where they invite their portfolio CEOs. It's an hour, it's every other week, and it's about a third of the time listening to a leader tell an inspiring story. And then for the other 40 minutes, it's just meeting in a breakout room. And I found those to be really, really helpful and thoughtful. And I've made a lot of new friends doing that as well. So for me, it's the human connection, which is helping the most.
That's great. Yes, I find that taking walks and doing a bit of yoga, and maybe I should try the chill moment that you were talking about with Phil. Yeah, taking a little bit of time has been helpful. But also, artists have been very generous, and they're sharing a lot of concerts online, a lot of theater online. And as a theater and music buff, that's what's gotten me going. So I just want to thank you all for the time that you've taken today. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for sharing your views on leadership, on how much you care, and the humanity with which you lead your organizations has really come through in this conversation. And I want to thank you so much for bringing that forward and making it okay to be totally human as a CEO or as a leader, and understanding the challenges that we're all living through. So with this, I am going to turn it back over to Luke Tannen, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And thank you, Maria. And another thanks to Annie, Marc, and Sam. We are so grateful and appreciative of all four of you sharing your time, your lessons, your perspectives with our community today. I personally took a ton of notes, a lot of great things shared. And for those of people who know me very personally, a nerdy trait that I have is I really like acrostics. So I was writing down these adjectives, and actually I spelled 2 words I wanted to share back out because I think it helps to summarize. The first word is care. And again, these are based on the adjectives that were shared here. A leader is a C, creative, A, an ambiguity decreaser, R, resilient, and E, empathetic. And the second word is stoic, and a leader is S, strong, T, transparent, O is an over-communicator, I is an intuition truster, and C is confident. And by the way, the definition of care, and so care is the provision of what's necessary for the health, welfare, maintenance, and protection of someone or something, very applicable today. And stoic is a person who can endure pain or hardship without complaining. Lots of pain and hardship. The without complaining part, I think that's the tricky part. But, I think I'd say that, as a community, whatever we can all do to really endure in the process of caring for each other, using the leadership lessons that were shared today, I think that'd be a great outcome for everyone in this city. So I want to thank all of you for everything that you're doing, how you're caring and supporting others. and for being great role models. And at Chicago Innovation, we're going to continue to do what we can to support our community, partnering with great folks like the ones today and many others. So stay positive, everyone. Stay most
Thanks
important.
all. Stay well.
Thank you. Be
Thanks,
well.
everyone. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.